right, how's everyone doing today? My name's Matt. I help lead the financial services research team here at CB Insights. We're going to do a short vignette that will cover some of what Chris just talked about on stage, and will also be covered throughout the next 2 days with some of the presentations and speakers that you'll be hearing from. So the topic of today's sort of short vignette is banking having its AWS moment? So what do we mean by this? When we think about AWS and its launch in 2006, a lot about it, what it really has done in the last 13 years was really slash the cost and time to launch a company. So back in the day, when you're starting let's say a small tech startup, you have to buy servers, you'd have to then develop web servers and front-end servers. And AWS really changed that. It abstracted that away and made it much simpler as well as cheaper to do so. So if we think about AWS back from its sort of start in 2006 to what it is now, it launched with 3 infrastructure as a service products. Today, over 180 different services, and continuing to add more every single month and as we go on. If you think about that just in terms of the size of what this business has become, it's now the 5th largest enterprise tech business in the world if you think about just revenues, probably on its way to surpass SAP. So this is now a gigantic business. But in the context of how we're talking about it today, we're really thinking about cost and time in terms of speed of launching a company. So when we look at sort of just cost to launch a startup, those have declined meaningfully since, and this is some data you see here on that. And of course, it's also ushered into this wave of startup formation as well as investment. It's changed how venture capital has been done. You started to see a wave of new seed investment into technology and software and services startups after the launch and evolution of AWS. Specifically, seed funding has grown to internet and mobile software and services companies significantly, and that's partly due to AWS and its ability to help companies get off the ground quicker and allow companies to experiment quicker as well. So what do we mean by that when we think about in the context of banking? One of the things that we're seeing in our research is sort of this early days of infrastructure that we're seeing that's enabling fintech companies to launch products quicker, to get to market quicker, and to become competitive quicker as well. So like AWS, we're starting to see this new middleware layer of APIs that are making it easier to launch banking products. These are companies that are providing API keys to allow companies to provide deposits or payments or other banking products as well. And I think what's interesting is that while we're seeing banks try to do this themselves with their own platforms, Chris mentioned Green Dot as a company, and we'll be hearing from them tomorrow. There's also a lot of startups that are looking to provide just the middleware layer for fintech companies. And this is just one part of the sort of emerging infrastructure that we're seeing throughout fintech today. If you think about data aggregation, the progress that companies like Plaid has made, where in 2015 they were doing almost 0 bank accounts connected to Plaid. I think now approaching almost 180 million bank accounts through Plaid today as well. So there's a lot of other infrastructure, and this is just one part that we'll be talking about today. So what is banking as a service? It's really just the enablement to very quickly provide FDI-insured access to deposit accounts or savings, direct deposit or savings accounts or ACH payments, and sit on top of sort of this regulated bank infrastructure. So if you think about a company like Green Dot, for example, they're working with companies like Uber and others to offer these banking products and be able to allow a company like Uber to offer their drivers interesting products, more instant payments and things like that. So what are some of the threats and opportunities that we're seeing from this new trend today? Well, one is we're starting to see a lot more banks talk about banking as a service. A lot of smaller banks especially see an opportunity to offer this platform type play to fintech companies as well as others who want to get into banking products. This is something that we've seen grow over the last few years when we think about earnings calls, for example. Big banks have an opportunity as well here, and we've seen a lot of bigger banks look to launch APIs and open banking platforms. But there's obviously some sort of challenges for big banks to do that. And I think the other thing that a lot of smaller fintech companies have realized is that there's a preference to work with smaller banks because of certain ways in which they enable access to interchange fees and higher interchange fees due to regulation. For example, the Durbin Amendment, there's significantly higher interchange fees if you're a bank under 10 billion in assets. And so we've seen a lot of this happen through smaller banks, right? So a lot of the fintech companies we're seeing work with different partner banks, some of which are here in this chart. And I think the reason why we can say that we're still in the early stages of this is because there are still so many partner banks that are working with different fintech companies. I think in the future, as we move forward and this becomes a more mature aspect, maybe fintech company won't have to go talk to 10 banking partners. There should be some of this middleware layer, as well as some of the platforms that are emerging today, will be so developed that it should be quicker to do so and not have to sort of go through this entire process. Today, we're starting to see a lot more banking products offered by both fintech companies and non-fintech companies, akin to, maybe not as explosive as what we saw with AWS, but certainly a lot more than we've seen in the past. And this is something you can trace just by year of launch in terms of some of these new sort of digital banking products that we're seeing in the market today. Very broadly, we're seeing this take place across two areas. One is fintech companies, which are maybe established or more at scale, looking to integrate new banking products. Debit cards, for example, is an area where we've seen a number of different companies look to launch within the last year or 2 years. And outside of fintech companies, we've also potentially in the future, we'll maybe start to see more hyper niche banking products, right? And Uber, for example, I mentioned as an example, but in the future, could we see banking products offered by Twitch for their streamers or Airbnb hosts? And so I think the enablement of sort of this infrastructure layer that's developing is what's going to help provide potentially some more products that we may not be even thinking about today. And with those alternatives, I think for banks in the room and for incumbents, certainly consumers are now thinking much more about, are now expecting more expectations from the banks they work with. If you look at some of the features that are now possible through digital banks, like access to your paycheck quicker and things that are just that customers are really thinking about more. I think that's something where fintechs are looking to compete more on and really sort of steal customers away from banks. And I think the interesting thing here is just if you take a really big step back, there's a lot of progress that's been made in digital banking. In 1999, there was a bank called Wingspan. I don't know if anyone remembers that. It was launched by Bank One, but the capabilities were such that if you wanted to access sort of electronic deposits, or if you wanted to sort of send a deposit and you couldn't do it electronic, you actually had to do it by physical mail. And then you saw about a few years ago, banks like Simple, which did take quite a bit longer to launch in terms of time and money before they could get to market. And now today, that's becoming quicker. And so I think a large part of that is we're seeing a lot of the features that digital banking can provide are becoming much more powerful. And with that, I think, just to end on this, as we see sort of more parity on banking services that are provided, starting to see more competitive dynamics shift, and in the future, maybe we'll see banks decide to go much more targeted in certain audiences, certain ways. But I think there's a lot of questions that need to be asked in terms of product differentiation, customer acquisition, and ways and features that are being offered today, as well as just best serving customers. And so I think these are some of the big questions that banks should be asking themselves today as we start to see more innovation in this sector. We've also been doing a lot of research on our blog as well as our platform on this topic. So with that, if you want to check out some of the links here, and look forward to continuing the discussion on this topic throughout the conference. So thank you very much.